Well, I went to the University of Aberdeen when I was 17. I was brought up in Glasgow and I thought I was going to the ends of the earth. And the first thing I remember about the city was it looked like a modern day Christian Athens in the sense that there were churches, places of worship, absolutely everywhere. And the astonishing thing was they were all made of this extraordinarily strong, powerful, almost overpowering granite. And they looked truly magnificent. But one of the things I began to notice was that they had very large congregations, but the telltale sign of where they were spiritually was that their annual givings were published and they were appalling. This was a city to which Samuel Rutherford, the great Scottish theologian and pastor, had been exiled in the 17th century. This was a city where the influence of John Knox had reached at the time of the Reformation. But in the previous 200 years, maybe 100 years before I became a student there, the rot had set in very deeply. The influence of the Enlightenment in Scotland, ultimately the rejection of Scripture and the gospel. With the result that, and I suppose somebody with discernment could have predicted this, that buildings that looked magnificent as recently as the 1960s would now be nightclubs or disco centres or upmarket apartment buildings, because the gospel had vanished internally in those buildings. And now it was obvious looking at them from the outside that the gospel had also vanished externally. And so in many ways those buildings are a kind of living parable of what has happened to the church in Scotland. But it has fallen into decay. It's like a ruined castle. And it is in desperate need of new resurrections to take place in churches.